Sarah first noticed the smell on a Tuesday morning in October. It wasn't overwhelming, just a faint, sweet decay that seemed to drift from somewhere deep within the walls of Hillcrest's student housing. She mentioned it to her roommate Mia, who shrugged and blamed the ancient ventilation system. "This place is falling apart anyway," Mia said, not looking up from her psychology textbook. "Half the pipes probably have dead rats in them." Sarah had been thrilled when she'd been matched with Mia Chin 3 months earlier. While other students complained about nightmare roommates who stole food or brought strangers home at all hours, Sarah had won the lottery. Mia was quiet, clean, and considerate. She kept regular hours, never left dishes in the sink, and actually improved their Wi-Fi situation by upgrading to some premium package she paid for herself. The only odd thing about Mia was how little Sarah actually saw her. Despite sharing a cramped 2-bedroom unit, they rarely crossed paths. Mia seemed to operate on a schedule that perfectly avoided Sarah's. When Sarah woke up, Mia had already left for her early classes. When Sarah returned from her evening job at the campus bookstore, Mia was either studying in her room with the door closed or already asleep. But that was fine. Sarah preferred the quiet anyway. The smell grew stronger over the next few days. Sarah bought air fresheners, cleaned out the mini fridge, and even scrubbed the bathroom grout, thinking maybe mold was growing somewhere. Nothing helped. The odor seemed to pulse through their apartment like a heartbeat, strongest in the early morning hours when Sarah was getting ready for class. On Friday evening, Sarah decided to ask Mia directly about it. She knocked on Mia's bedroom door and waited. No response. She tried the handle, locked, as always. Sarah had never actually seen inside Mia's room. In 3 months of living together, Mia had never once left her door open. That night, Sarah lay awake listening to the sounds from Mia's room. Not the usual shuffle of movement or creak of bed springs, but something else. A soft, rhythmic scraping, like fingernails on wood. It went on for hours. The next morning, Mia emerged from her room looking perfectly normal, fresh-faced, hair neat, wearing a clean lavender sweater that Sarah had complimented before. She smiled and asked Sarah about her weekend plans, making polite conversation while preparing what looked like a protein shake in the blender. "Are you feeling okay?" Sarah asked. "I heard some weird noises last night." Mia paused, the blender whirring to a stop. "Weird noises? From your room? Like scratching?" "Oh." Mia laughed, but it sounded forced. "I was rearranging some furniture. Sorry if I kept you up." She finished her shake and headed out, leaving Sarah alone with the increasingly putrid smell and a growing unease she couldn't quite name. That afternoon, Sarah received a text from her friend Jessica. "Hey, saw your roommate at the grocery store yesterday. She was buying some really weird stuff. Like, industrial-level cleaning supplies and those thick plastic tarps. Thought you might want to know in case she's planning some kind of prank or something. Asterisk." Sarah stared at her phone. Yesterday was Thursday. Mia had been in classes all day Thursday. Sarah remembered because she'd borrowed Mia's textbook that morning and returned it to the kitchen counter where Mia would see it. When would Mia have had time to go grocery shopping? She decided to do something she'd never done before. She looked up Mia's class schedule. As her roommate, Sarah had access to Mia's academic information through the housing portal for emergency purposes. What she found made her stomach drop. Mia Chin wasn't enrolled in any classes this semester. According to the university records, Mia had withdrawn from all her courses in August, 3 weeks before Sarah had moved in. But Mia left every morning with a backpack full of textbooks. She talked about her professors, complained about assignments, mentioned study groups. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through more information. Mia Chin had also been removed from the housing roster in August. Officially, Sarah was supposed to be living alone. The implications crashed over her like ice water. If Mia wasn't a student, if she wasn't supposed to be living here, then who was she? And why was she pretending? This is just the beginning of the nightmare. What Sarah discovers next about her perfect roommate will shatter everything she thought she knew about the person she's been living with. That evening, Sarah pretended everything was normal. When Mia returned home at her usual time, Sarah was ready with casual questions. "How was Professor Martinez's class today?" Sarah asked, remembering Mia had mentioned this professor before. "Oh, the usual lecture on cognitive behavioral therapy," Mia replied smoothly. "Pretty boring stuff." Sarah nodded, her pulse racing. She looked up Professor Martinez. He taught organic chemistry, not psychology. And his classes were only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. After Mia went to her room, Sarah waited until she heard the familiar scraping sounds begin. Then she quietly grabbed her phone and stepped outside their apartment. She needed to call someone, but who? The police would think she was crazy. What crime had actually been committed? Lying about class schedules? Living somewhere without permission? Instead, she called campus security and reported a strange smell that might indicate a gas leak or dead animal in the walls. It was a weak excuse, but it would get someone official into their apartment. The security guard arrived 20 minutes later, a tired-looking man named Frank who seemed annoyed to be checking on what was probably nothing. Sarah led him inside, noticing with relief that the smell was particularly strong tonight. "Yeah, that's definitely something," Frank said, wrinkling his nose. "Probably a dead rat in the walls. Happens all the time in these old buildings." He walked around the apartment, sniffing like a bloodhound. "Seems strongest around this area," he said, stopping outside Mia's bedroom door. The scraping sounds had stopped the moment they'd entered the apartment. "My roommate's asleep," Sarah said quickly. "But maybe you could check the other rooms?" Frank shrugged and continued his inspection, but found nothing obvious. "I'll file a report for facilities to check the walls next week," he said. "In the meantime, try some stronger air fresheners." After he left, Sarah sat in her kitchen, staring at Mia's closed door. The scraping had resumed, but now it sounded different. More urgent. More deliberate. She made a decision that would change everything. At 3 a.m., when the apartment was silent, Sarah crept to Mia's door. She noticed earlier that the lock was just a simple privacy lock, the kind you could open with a paperclip or bobby pin. Her hands trembled as she worked the mechanism, expecting at any moment to hear Mia's voice asking what she was doing. The lock clicked open. Sarah pushed the door inward, her phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. What she saw made her legs nearly give out. The room was empty. Completely empty. No bed, no furniture, no clothes. Nothing except bare walls and carpet. And in the center of the floor, a perfect rectangular section of carpet had been cut away, revealing the concrete subflooring beneath. The concrete had been broken through, creating a hole about 3 feet by 6 feet. The smell hit her like a physical force, sweet, putrid, unmistakable. Sarah's flashlight beam trembled as she approached the hole. She could see plastic sheeting lining the bottom, and shapes within the plastic that her mind refused to process. Her breath came in short gasps as she realized what she was looking at. But it wasn't the hole that made her scream. It was the sound of the front door opening behind her, and Mia's voice, calm and conversational, saying, "I really hoped you wouldn't do that, Sarah." Sarah spun around, her flashlight illuminating Mia's face in the doorway. Mia looked exactly the same as always, neat, clean, wearing that same lavender sweater. But now Sarah could see what she'd missed before. The sweater wasn't just similar to one she'd complimented. It was identical. Down to the small coffee stain on the left sleeve that Sarah remembered from her own closet. "Where did you get that sweater?" Sarah whispered. Mia looked down at herself, then back at Sarah with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You have such good taste," she said. "I've learned so much from you these past few months. How to do my hair like yours, how to dress like you, even how to talk like you. You're going to help me with the final step." Sarah's phone slipped from her shaking hands, the flashlight beam spinning wildly before settling on something else that made her stomach lurch. In the corner of the empty room, she could now see a neat pile of clothes. Her clothes. Items she thought she'd misplaced or lost in the laundry. "The smell," Sarah managed to say. "That's just temporary," Mia said, stepping into the room. "I've been practicing, but I'm still learning. The preservation process is harder than I thought. But don't worry, by the time I'm done with you, I'll have it perfected. Sarah bolted for the door, but Mia was ready. Something sharp pressed into Sarah's neck, not a knife, but a syringe. The world began to tilt and blur at the edges. As consciousness faded, Sarah heard Mia's voice, no longer mimicking her speech patterns but speaking in her natural tone for the first time. The real Mia Chin is down there with the others. I needed her student housing assignment, you see. But she was too short, wrong hair color. You're perfect though. We're exactly the same size. The last thing Sarah saw before everything went black was her own reflection in the window, standing next to someone who looked exactly like her, wearing her clothes, her hairstyle, her life. When Sarah woke up, she was looking at herself. Not a mirror, the real her, standing above her, adjusting the lavender sweater and checking her appearance in a compact mirror. Sarah tried to move but found herself bound tightly with plastic sheeting. She was in the hole, she realized. The hole where the others were. The beautiful thing about student housing, the thing wearing her face said without looking down, is how anonymous it is. Roommates come and go, people transfer, drop out, change majors. No one really keeps track. I can be Sarah Morrison for at least another year before anyone starts asking questions. Sarah tried to scream, but only a muffled sound escaped through the gag. Don't worry. Her doppelganger continued, now practicing Sarah's laugh in the mirror. I've gotten much better at the preservation process. You won't smell as much as the others did. The last thing Sarah heard was the sound of her own voice humming a song she'd hummed countless times while getting ready for class. A song this thing had been listening to and learning for months. 3 weeks later, Sarah's parents received a cheerful email from their daughter's university account, explaining that she'd decided to take a semester abroad and wouldn't be able to call much due to poor international connections. The email was perfectly written in Sarah's voice, down to her habit of ending sentences with hugs and kisses. Her new roommate assigned after Mia Chin had mysteriously withdrawn from housing, never noticed the faint smell that seemed to drift up from the floorboards. And if she did notice how perfectly clean and organized Sarah kept everything, how she never seemed to receive mail or packages, how she sometimes stood in front of the mirror for hours practicing facial expressions, well, everyone had their quirks. After all, Sarah was the perfect roommate. Marcus knew something was wrong when he found his roommate Alex sitting in the dark at 3 a.m., whispering into his phone with tears streaming down his face. Please, you have to understand, Alex was saying to whoever was on the other end. I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted someone to talk to. When Alex noticed Marcus standing in the doorway, he quickly hung up and wiped his eyes, forcing his usual bright smile. Hey buddy! Couldn't sleep either? Want to grab some late-night snacks and chat? Marcus had moved into the shared apartment near campus 2 months ago, grateful to find someone willing to split the rent on such short notice. Alex seemed perfect, friendly, outgoing, always eager to talk about everything from classes to childhood memories to philosophical debates that stretched late into the night. Maybe too eager. In those first weeks, Marcus had appreciated having someone who genuinely seemed interested in his life. Alex asked thoughtful questions about Marcus's family back in Ohio, his struggles with organic chemistry, even his complicated relationship with his ex-girlfriend Emma. Alex was an incredible listener, the kind of person who remembered every detail and brought up previous conversations days later. How did your mom's doctor appointment go? Alex would ask, referring to something Marcus had mentioned weeks earlier. Or, did you ever hear back from that internship in Denver? It felt good to have someone who cared. Marcus had always been somewhat introverted, and making friends in a new city had proved difficult. Alex filled that void perfectly. But lately, Marcus had started noticing things. Like how Alex never seemed to receive any calls or texts of his own, despite constantly encouraging Marcus to share every detail of his communications with others. Or how Alex's stories about his own life were always vague, lacking the specific details that made Marcus's stories so vivid and memorable. And then there were the notebooks. Marcus first spotted them when Alex had left his bedroom door open while grabbing something from the kitchen. Stacks of composition books arranged neatly on Alex's desk, each one labeled with what looked like dates. When Marcus had casually asked about them, Alex had quickly closed the door and said they were just class notes. But Marcus wasn't taking any of the same classes as Alex. In fact, Marcus had never actually seen Alex studying or heading to campus. The night Marcus witnessed the tearful phone call was the turning point. The next morning, Alex was back to his usual cheerful self, making coffee and asking Marcus about his plans for the day. But something in his eyes had changed, a desperate hunger that made Marcus uncomfortable. "So tell me about Emma again," Alex said, settling into his favorite spot on the couch. "You said she texted you yesterday?" Marcus hesitated. He had mentioned Emma's text, but something about the way Alex was asking felt different. More intense. "Just casual stuff," he said. "Come on, you can tell me," Alex pressed, leaning forward. "What exactly did she say? I want to hear everything." "Alex, it's really not that interesting." "Please," Alex interrupted, and there was something almost frantic in his voice. "I need to know. What did she say? How did it make you feel? What are you going to say back?" Marcus stared at his roommate, recognizing something he'd been ignoring for weeks. This wasn't normal curiosity, or even close friendship. This was something else entirely. That evening, while Alex was out on one of his mysterious errands, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He searched Alex's room. The notebooks were even more disturbing than he'd imagined. Page after page of conversations transcribed in Alex's precise handwriting. Not summaries, exact word-for-word dialogues, complete with timestamps and Marcus's emotional reactions noted in the margins. October 3rd, 11:47 p.m. Marcus mentioned feeling anxious about midterms. Voice slightly shaky. Fidgeted with phone while talking. Asked follow-up about study methods. October 8th, 2:15 p.m. Emma discussion. Marcus smiled when saying her name but frowned when mentioning their fight. Potential reconciliation opportunity? Important. Ask about this again tomorrow. October 12th, 8:30 a.m. Marcus received call from mom. Looked worried after hanging up. Did not immediately share details. Probed carefully. There were dozens of notebooks, dating back to the day Marcus had moved in. Every conversation, every emotion, every private moment had been catalogued and analyzed like data points in some twisted social experiment. But it was the most recent notebook that made Marcus's blood run cold. Plan Phase 1. Complete subject fully trusts me and shares personal information freely. Plan Phase 2. In progress isolates subject from external relationships. Subtly discourage contact with family/friends. Become primary emotional support. Plan Phase 3. Pending transition to full dependency. Subject should rely entirely on me for social interaction and validation. Notes. Subject responded well to active listening techniques. Shows signs of attachment. Continue encouraging oversharing. Monitor for resistance to isolation attempts. Marcus's hands shook as he read entry after entry detailing Alex's methodical manipulation of their friendship. It wasn't friendship at all. It was some kind of psychological study with Marcus as the unwilling test subject. The final entry was dated yesterday. Subject becoming suspicious. May need to accelerate timeline. Prepare contingency plans. What Marcus discovers next about his roommate's true intentions will shatter everything he thought he knew about trust, friendship, and the dangerous lengths some people will go to satisfy their deepest psychological needs. Marcus quickly photographed several pages and returned everything exactly as he'd found it. When Alex returned home an hour later, Marcus was sitting casually on the couch, pretending to watch TV. "Hey buddy," Alex said with his trademark enthusiasm. "How was your day? You look a little tense. Want to talk about it?" "Actually, yeah," Marcus said, making a split-second decision. "I've been thinking about what you said last week." About maybe taking a break from texting Emma so much. Alex's eyes lit up with interest. Oh? What brought that on? I think you were right. Maybe I am too dependent on external validation. Marcus watched Alex's face carefully as he spoke. I was thinking maybe I should delete her number entirely. Focus on the relationships I have here. That's really mature of you, Alex said, sitting down next to Marcus. Closer than usual. I'm proud of you for recognizing that. You don't need her anyway. You have everything you need right here. The possessiveness in Alex's voice was unmistakable now that Marcus knew what to listen for. Over the next few days, Marcus played along with Alex's manipulation while secretly documenting everything. He started recording their conversations on his phone, photographed more pages from the notebooks, and began reaching out to old friends to verify details about Alex's background. What he discovered was that Alex Morrison didn't exist. The name was real, but it belonged to someone who had died in a car accident 3 years ago. The Alex living in Marcus's apartment was using a stolen identity, and based on Marcus's research, this wasn't the first time. Marcus found traces of similar living situations in 3 other cities, always targeting lonely college students, always the same pattern of intense friendship followed by isolation and control. In 2 cases, the previous roommates had filed police reports for stalking and harassment after Alex disappeared. In 1 case, the roommate had transferred schools entirely and moved back home. Marcus realized he was just the latest victim in a pattern that had been going on for years. But Alex was getting sloppier. The notebooks were more detailed now, more obsessive. The phone call Marcus had overheard that first night suggested Alex was talking to someone about his work, perhaps comparing notes with other predators, or reporting to someone higher up in some kind of organized psychological exploitation network. Marcus decided to confront Alex, but not directly. Instead, he planned to catch him in the act and gather enough evidence to expose the entire operation. The opportunity came on a Thursday night when Alex announced he was going out to meet a study group. Marcus knew this was a lie. Alex didn't attend any actual classes. Instead of following him, Marcus waited until he was sure Alex was gone, then called the number Alex had been whispering to that night. The voice that answered was immediately familiar. "Hello, Marcus," the voice said before Marcus had spoken a word. "Alex told me you might call eventually." It was Dr. Patricia Wells, Marcus's former therapist from Ohio. The therapist he'd told Alex about in detail during one of their late-night conversations. The therapist Alex had encouraged him to talk about, asking specific questions about Marcus's sessions and emotional vulnerabilities. "Dr. Wells? I don't understand. How do you know Alex?" "Alex is one of my most dedicated students," she said calmly. "He's been practicing advanced therapeutic observation techniques under my supervision. You've been an excellent case study, Marcus. Very responsive to emotional manipulation." The words hit Marcus like ice water. "Case study? Oh yes. We've been documenting your psychological patterns for months now. Your responses to isolation, your need for validation, your abandonment issues stemming from your father's death. Alex has been feeding all of it back to me. We're preparing a research paper on vulnerability exploitation in young adults." Marcus felt sick. "This is illegal. You can't experiment on people without consent. Can we?" Dr. Wells's voice was perfectly calm, clinical. "You volunteered every piece of information freely. You chose to trust Alex. You chose to isolate yourself from your support systems at his suggestion. We simply listened." The front door opened. Alex was back early. "I have to go," Marcus whispered into the phone. "Marcus," Dr. Wells said before he could hang up, "Alex is very attached to you. More than he should be for this type of research. I'd be careful if I were you. He's been asking about extending the study indefinitely." The line went dead just as Alex appeared in the doorway, smiling his perfect, practiced smile. "Hey buddy. You're still up. Want to chat?" But this time, Marcus could see the hunger in Alex's eyes clearly. Not just for information, but for something deeper. Something that suggested this had moved far beyond academic research into dangerous obsession. Actually, Marcus said, standing slowly, I think I'm done talking. Alex's smile faltered for just a moment, and in that moment, Marcus saw something that made his blood freeze. Alex wasn't just studying him anymore. Alex had become him. The way Alex stood now, the way he tilted his head, even the way he'd started dressing, it was all a perfect mirror of Marcus's own mannerisms. Alex hadn't just been cataloging Marcus's psychology. He'd been absorbing his entire identity. What do you mean, done talking? Alex asked, and his voice was different now. Flatter. More like Marcus's own voice than Alex's usual enthusiasm. Marcus backed toward his bedroom, but Alex stepped between him and the door. We need to chat, Marcus. We have so much to discuss. I've learned so much from you. About you. I know you better than you know yourself now. Alex pulled out his phone and showed Marcus the screen. It was a recording app, and it had been running for the entire conversation Marcus had just had with Dr. Wells. I know you found my notebooks, Alex said, still smiling. I know you've been pretending for the past few days. I know you think you're going to expose me. Alex stepped closer, and Marcus could see that the notebooks weren't the only thing Alex had been hiding. Behind Alex's smile was something broken and desperate, and completely unmoored from reality. But here's what you don't understand, Marcus. I don't want to study you anymore. Alex's voice was now completely identical to Marcus's own. I want to be you. Rachel first suspected something was wrong when she realized her roommate's 4-year-old daughter had never once asked for her mother during the 3 weeks they'd been living together. Most children that age would cry, throw tantrums, or at least call out, "Mommy," when separated from their parent for any length of time. But Lily sat quietly in her designated corner of the living room for hours each day, coloring in the same book over and over, never speaking unless directly addressed. When Rachel had responded to the Craigslist ad for a shared apartment, Diana had seemed like the perfect roommate. A single mother in her early 30s, clean, responsible, with references from previous landlords. The rent was split evenly despite Diana and Lily taking the larger bedroom, and Diana had even offered to handle most of the cooking in exchange for Rachel occasionally watching Lily. She's very well behaved, Diana had said during their initial meeting, while Lily sat motionless on the couch beside her. She won't be any trouble at all. Diana hadn't been lying. Lily was unnaturally well behaved. She ate whatever was put in front of her without complaint, went to bed at exactly 7:30 p.m. every night, and never made noise during Rachel's early morning video calls for work. She spoke only when asked direct questions, and even then, her responses were brief and careful. "How was your day, Lily?" Rachel would ask when she came home from her marketing job. "Good," Lily would respond, not looking up from her coloring book. "What did you do today?" "Colored. Read. Waited for Mommy." Always the same routine answers, delivered in the same flat tone. Rachel initially attributed Lily's behavior to shyness around a new person, but after 3 weeks, she was starting to wonder if something else was going on. The child never seemed to play, never laughed, never showed excitement about anything. She reminded Rachel of documentaries she'd seen about institutionalized children, emotionally shut down and hypervigilant. Diana's behavior was equally concerning, though in different ways. She was obsessively neat, cleaning constantly and becoming visibly anxious if anything was out of place. She monitored Lily's every movement and rarely left the apartment without her daughter. When she did go out alone, it was always for exactly 90 minutes, never more, never less. And Diana talked about Lily constantly, but never in the way Rachel expected a loving mother to speak about her child. "Lily ate all her vegetables today," Diana would report, as if delivering a progress update. "She sat quietly for 4 hours while I worked on applications. She went to sleep on schedule. Never. Lily said something funny today." Or, "Lily loves this new book." Always performance metrics, like Lily was a project to be managed rather than a daughter to be cherished. The first real red flag came when Rachel offered to take Lily to the park one Saturday afternoon, while Diana was having what she called an important phone interview. "That's not necessary," Diana had said quickly. "Lily doesn't like parks. All kids like parks." Rachel had laughed. "Don't you, Lily?" Lily had looked between Rachel and her mother with an expression Rachel couldn't quite read, not quite fear, but something close to it. "Lily knows what's best for her," Diana had said firmly. "She's very mature for her age." That night, Rachel heard crying through the thin walls. Not Diana, Lily. Quiet, muffled sobbing that went on for nearly an hour before stopping abruptly. When Rachel saw Lily the next morning, the child had a small bruise on her upper arm that Diana explained away as a result of clumsiness during bath time. Rachel began paying closer attention to the details of their living situation, and what she discovered made her increasingly uncomfortable. Lily's clothes were all identical, 5 sets of the same gray dress, same white socks, same black shoes. Her toys consisted of 3 coloring books, a box of crayons worn down to stubs, and a single ragged stuffed elephant that she clutched whenever Diana left the room. Diana's side of their shared refrigerator contained carefully portioned meals in identical containers, each labeled with dates and nutritional information. Lily's portions were notably smaller than what Rachel would consider appropriate for a growing child. Most disturbing was the chart Rachel glimpsed on Diana's bedside table, a detailed log tracking Lily's daily activities, eating habits, sleep patterns, and what Diana labeled as compliance scores. Each day was rated on a scale of 1 to 10, with notes about improvement areas and behavioral corrections. When Rachel casually asked Diana about Lily's father, Diana's response was immediate and rehearsed. "He's not in the picture. It's always been just Lily and me." But when Rachel asked Lily the same question while Diana was in the shower, the child's response was different. "Mommy says I don't have a daddy anymore." The word "anymore" stuck with Rachel for days. What Rachel uncovers about Diana and Lily's past will shatter everything she thought she understood about motherhood, protection, and the lengths some people will go to create the perfect family. Rachel's growing concerns led her to do something she'd never done before. She started investigating her roommate. A simple Google search for Diana Martinez missing child yielded nothing, but when she tried Lily Martinez missing, the results made her blood run cold. Lily Martinez, age 4, had been reported missing from Phoenix, Arizona, 6 months ago. The Amber Alert photos showed the same face Rachel saw every day, though the missing child had longer hair and was wearing a bright pink dress, nothing like the gray uniforms Lily wore now. The missing child's mother was listed as Jennifer Martinez, not Diana. And according to the reports, Lily had been taken by her father, David Martinez, during what was supposed to be a supervised visitation. But the woman living in Rachel's apartment was definitely not David Martinez. Rachel's hands shook as she read through news articles about the case. Jennifer Martinez had been fighting for custody of Lily for over a year, claiming that David was psychologically unstable and had been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior. The last article was dated 3 months ago, reporting that both David and Lily remained missing and that the FBI had taken over the investigation. There was no mention of anyone named Diana. That evening, Rachel watched Diana and Lily more carefully than ever before. Diana's interactions with the child were clinical, almost performative. She spoke to Lily like she was following a script for how mothers were supposed to behave, but there was no genuine warmth or connection. And Lily's responses were those of a child who had been trained to behave in specific ways, not a daughter naturally interacting with her mother. Rachel waited until Diana went to take her nightly shower, always exactly 15 minutes, always with the bathroom door locked, before approaching Lily. "Lily," she said softly, kneeling down to the child's level. "Can you tell me about before you lived here? Do you remember your house in Arizona?" Lily's coloring crayon stopped moving. She looked at Rachel with wide, careful eyes. "I'm not supposed to talk about before," she whispered. "It's okay. You can tell me. Diana says I'm her little girl now. She says if I'm very good and don't talk about before, nothing bad will happen to me." Rachel's heart raced. "What happened to your real mommy, sweetheart?" Diana says my daddy took me away because my real mommy was bad. But Diana is good. She teaches me how to be good too. The shower was still running, but Rachel knew she only had a few more minutes. Lily, what's your daddy's name? David. But Diana says I should call her David sometimes, when other people might hear. She says it's a game. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Diana wasn't Lily's kidnapper. She was David's accomplice, or possibly David himself, somehow transformed. The obsessive documentation, the rigid control, the complete isolation of the child. This was someone systematically breaking down a 4-year-old's sense of identity and reality. Rachel heard the shower turn off. Lily, I need you to listen to me very carefully. She whispered urgently. If anything scary happens, I want you to run to Mrs. Chen next door and tell her to call the police. Can you remember that? Lily nodded just as Diana emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, her hair wet and slicked back in a way that suddenly made her face look different. More angular. More masculine. What are you two talking about? Diana asked, and for the first time, Rachel noticed something off about her voice. It was slightly deeper than usual, and there was an edge to it that hadn't been there before. Just chatting about her coloring, Rachel said, trying to keep her voice steady. Diana's eyes narrowed slightly. Lily, go to your room and get ready for bed. As Lily obediently gathered her crayons, Diana continued staring at Rachel with an intensity that made her skin crawl. You know, Diana said slowly, I've been thinking it might be time for Lily and me to find a new place. Somewhere more private. Rachel's blood turned to ice. Really? I thought you liked it here. Oh, I do. But Lily and I, we need space to be ourselves. To continue our work together. Diana smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She's making such good progress. Learning to be the daughter I always wanted. The way Diana said, daughter I always wanted, made Rachel realize the full scope of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just kidnapping. This was systematic psychological reconstruction of a child's identity by someone who had completely lost touch with reality. And now Diana knew that Rachel was suspicious. That night, Rachel lay awake listening to the sounds from the next room. She could hear Diana's voice, low and constant, and occasionally Lily's tiny responses. It sounded like some kind of interrogation or programming session. Around 2 a.m., Rachel heard her bedroom door creak open. She kept her breathing steady, pretending to be asleep, as footsteps approached her bed. Through barely opened eyes, she could see Diana standing over her, holding something in her hand. I know you're awake, Rachel, Diana whispered. I know you've been asking questions. Rachel's eyes snapped open. Diana was holding a syringe. You see, the thing about creating the perfect family, Diana continued in that same conversational whisper, is that sometimes you have to eliminate obstacles. Lily's real mother was an obstacle. Her teachers were obstacles. And now you're becoming an obstacle. Rachel rolled away just as Diana lunged forward with the syringe. She scrambled out of bed and ran for the door, but Diana was faster than she looked. Lily! Rachel shouted as Diana grabbed her arm. Run! Call the police! Instead of running, Lily appeared in the doorway, completely calm. It's okay, Diana, the 4-year-old said in that same flat tone she always used. Rachel doesn't understand yet. But she will. Rachel stared at the child in horror, realizing that the programming had gone deeper than she'd imagined. Lily wasn't just a victim anymore. She'd become a willing participant in her own psychological destruction. Diana smiled, relaxing her grip slightly. You see? Lily knows what's best. She's learned to be grateful for the structure I provide. The love I give her. This isn't love, Rachel gasped. Isn't it? Diana's voice was completely calm now. I've given her purpose, discipline, and unconditional acceptance. I've removed all the chaos and uncertainty from her life. I've made her perfect. Rachel looked at Lily, searching for any sign of the frightened child who had whispered about her real mother just hours before. But that child was gone, replaced by something hollow and compliant. And now, Diana continued, raising the syringe again. You're going to help me understand what went wrong with my approach. You're going to be my test case for adult subjects. The last thing Rachel saw before the needle found its mark was Lily's small hand reaching up to take Diana's free hand, and the child's voice saying, "Don't worry, Rachel. Being good is much easier once you stop fighting." Jake knew his roommate was lying about something the morning he found a federal surveillance manual hidden inside Tyler's economics textbook. Tyler had been the perfect roommate for 8 months, quiet, clean, always paid his half of the rent on time for their cramped Chicago apartment. He claimed to be a graduate student in business, spent most days at the library, and kept to himself. The kind of low-maintenance living situation Jake had dreamed of when he'd moved to the city for his job at a tech startup. But Tyler's economics textbook was sitting open on the kitchen counter that Tuesday morning, and when Jake moved it to make coffee, several pages of dense federal documentation slipped out. Official-looking papers with FBI letterhead, surveillance protocols, and what appeared to be background information on someone named Subject J7. Jake quickly shoved the papers back into the book, his heart racing. Tyler was either some kind of federal agent, or he was involved in something seriously illegal. Either way, Jake was sharing an apartment with someone who had been lying about his identity for the better part of a year. When Tyler returned that evening, Jake watched him carefully. The man he'd known as a somewhat awkward grad student suddenly seemed different. The way he moved through the apartment, how his eyes automatically scanned the room when he entered, the practiced casualness of his small talk. How had Jake never noticed these things before? "How was the library today?" Jake asked, testing. "Productive," Tyler replied, setting down a backpack that definitely didn't look like it belonged to a student. "Working on a research paper about market volatility." Jake nodded, but he'd caught something in Tyler's response. A slight pause before, "Research paper," as if he was translating from something else. And Tyler's clothes, Jake realized now that they were too nice, too well fitted for a graduate student living on a teaching assistant's salary. Over the next few days, Jake began noticing details that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Tyler's laptop was never left unattended and required multiple passwords to access. He received phone calls at odd hours that he always took in his bedroom with the door closed. And despite claiming to be from Portland, Tyler had never once mentioned specific places, friends, or memories from there. His past was a collection of vague generalities. Most unsettling was the way Tyler had started asking questions. Subtle inquiries about Jake's work, his friends, his family back in Ohio. Questions that felt less like roommate small talk and more like interviews. "So your job at Dataflow involves cloud security?" Tyler had asked casually while they watched TV. "That must be interesting. What kind of systems do you work with?" At the time, Jake had been happy to have his roommate show interest in his work. Now, he wondered what Tyler was really asking and why. Jake decided to do some investigating of his own. A simple Google search for Tyler Morrison Chicago graduate student yielded nothing. No university directory listings, no academic publications, no social media presence. For someone supposedly working on a graduate degree, Tyler had remarkably little digital footprint. But when Jake tried searching for Tyler Morrison FBI, he found something that made his stomach drop. A news article from 6 months ago mentioned an agent Tyler Morrison in connection with a cybercrime investigation targeting tech companies in the Chicago area. Companies that used cloud security systems. Companies like Dataflow. Jake read the article 3 times, trying to process what it meant. The investigation had involved suspected insider trading based on security vulnerabilities in corporate cloud systems. The kind of vulnerabilities that someone with Jake's access and knowledge could potentially exploit. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. Tyler hadn't randomly responded to Jake's roommate ad. He'd specifically sought out Jake because of his job, his access, his potential usefulness as either a suspect or an informant in an ongoing federal investigation. For 8 months, Jake had been living with an undercover FBI agent who was investigating him. Every conversation they'd had, Every detail Jake had shared about his work and personal life had been part of some kind of surveillance operation. Tyler had been building a case, gathering evidence, waiting for Jake to incriminate himself in whatever crime the Bureau suspected him of. But Jake hadn't committed any crimes. He was a software engineer who fixed security patches and maintained servers. The most illegal thing he'd done lately was illegally stream a few movies. Unless Tyler was trying to entrap him into committing a crime. The reality of Jake's situation is far more complex and dangerous than he realizes. What he discovers next about the FBI's investigation will force him to question everything he thought he knew about justice, surveillance, and his own innocence. Jake spent the next week in a state of paranoid hypervigilance, analyzing every interaction with Tyler for signs of manipulation or entrapment. He began to see their 8 months of cohabitation in a completely different light. Tyler's questions about Jake's work hadn't been casual interest, they'd been fishing expeditions. Tyler's encouragement for Jake to network more and attend tech industry meetups hadn't been friendly advice. It had been an attempt to get Jake connected with potential co-conspirators. Even Tyler's suggestion that Jake should ask for a promotion had probably been an effort to get him access to higher-level systems. The most disturbing realization was that Tyler was good at this. Really good. He'd created a completely believable persona, built genuine rapport with Jake, and made Jake feel comfortable enough to share details about his work that could potentially be used against him. If Jake hadn't accidentally found those documents, he might have gone months or even years without suspecting anything. But now that he knew, Jake found himself trapped in an impossible situation. He couldn't confront Tyler without revealing that he'd been snooping through his things. He couldn't move out without potentially looking like he was fleeing from something. And he couldn't just pretend everything was normal while living under federal surveillance. Jake decided to test his theory by doing something slightly unusual at work, staying late to run some routine diagnostics that he'd normally do from home. If Tyler was monitoring him, there should be some reaction. Sure enough, when Jake got home that night, Tyler was waiting in the kitchen with questions. "You're home late," Tyler said, and Jake caught the subtle probing tone. "Everything okay at work?" "Just some server maintenance," Jake replied. "Had to stay late to babysit the systems while they updated." "Ah." Tyler nodded, but Jake could see him processing the information. "Anything major?" "Nothing interesting. Just routine patches." But Tyler's follow-up questions were anything but routine. He wanted to know which systems, what kind of access Jake had during the maintenance window, whether other employees had similar access. The kind of detailed questioning that would help build a profile of exactly how someone in Jake's position could potentially commit cybercrimes. Jake began to wonder if Tyler was working alone or if there were other agents involved. Was their apartment bugged? Were Jake's communications being monitored? How deep did this surveillance go? The paranoia was exhausting, but it also sharpened Jake's awareness of things he'd previously missed. Tyler's classes always seemed to end at times that coincided with Jake's work schedule. Tyler's laptop was positioned so he could see Jake's computer screen from his bedroom doorway. And Tyler had an uncanny ability to show up whenever Jake was on important work calls, always with some excuse about needing something from the kitchen. 3 weeks after discovering Tyler's real identity, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He was going to gather evidence of his own. Jake waited until Tyler left for one of his fake classes, then used a credit card to slip the lock on Tyler's bedroom door, a skill he'd learned in college that he never expected to use for something this serious. What he found inside Tyler's room was worse than he'd imagined. The walls were covered with printed photographs of Jake. Pictures taken with a telephoto lens from across the street, showing Jake entering and leaving their building, walking to work, meeting friends for drinks. Some of the photos were clearly taken before they become roommates, which meant Tyler had been surveilling Jake for weeks or months before moving in. Tyler's desk contained detailed files on Jake's employment history, financial records, family members, and even psychological profiles based on his social media activity. There were transcripts of conversations, not just between Jake and Tyler, but between Jake and his coworkers, Jake and his friends, even Jake and his parents during phone calls home. The level of surveillance was comprehensive and deeply invasive. Tyler hadn't just been investigating Jake's potential involvement in cybercrime. He'd been mapping every aspect of Jake's life with the thoroughness of someone building a case for major federal prosecution. But the most disturbing discovery was a file labeled Operation Compromise. Jake opened it with shaking hands and found a detailed plan for something called controlled entrapment. The FBI was planning to present Jake with an opportunity to commit exactly the kind of cybercrime they suspected him of. Tyler was going to introduce Jake to someone posing as a criminal contact who would offer him money in exchange for using his access to compromise data flow's security systems. According to the timeline in the file, this was supposed to happen within the next 2 weeks. Jake realized he was looking at a plan to destroy his life based on a crime he hadn't committed and had no intention of committing. The FBI was going to create a fake opportunity, record him accepting it, and then arrest him for conspiracy to commit cybercrime. The worst part was that Jake could see how it might work. If Tyler introduced him to someone offering serious money for a seemingly simple favor, and if that person was convincing enough, Jake might actually consider it. Financial pressure, curiosity, the gradual normalization of small ethical compromises. The FBI had studied his psychology well enough to know exactly how to manipulate him. Jake heard the front door open. Tyler was back early. Jake quickly photographed several pages of the file with his phone and returned everything to its original position. He just managed to get Tyler's door closed when Tyler appeared in the hallway. "Hey," Tyler said, and Jake thought he detected a slight suspicion in his voice. "You're home early today. Feeling a little sick?" Jake said, hoping Tyler couldn't hear his heart pounding. "Came home to rest." Tyler nodded, but his eyes were scanning Jake's face with professional assessment. "You do look a little pale. Hope you're not coming down with something." That night, Jake lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out his next move. He had evidence that he was the target of an entrapment operation, but who could he trust with that information? Going to the FBI would be pointless. They were the ones running the operation. A lawyer might help, but what crime had actually been committed? Tyler was doing his job, however unethically. Jake realized that the system was designed to be inescapable. Once you became a target of federal investigation, every move you made could be interpreted as either evidence of guilt or evidence of consciousness of guilt. Cooperating made you look suspicious. Not cooperating made you look more suspicious. The next morning, Tyler made an announcement that confirmed Jake's worst fears. "Hey, I've got a friend coming to town next week," Tyler said over breakfast. "Guy I know from college who works in corporate consulting. Wondered if you might want to meet him. He's always interested in talking to people in tech." Jake's blood ran cold. This was it, the beginning of Operation Compromise. Tyler's friend would be the fake criminal contact who would offer Jake the opportunity to betray his employer. "Sure," Jake said, trying to sound casual. "Always happy to meet new people." Tyler smiled, and for the first time since Jake had known him, the smile looked genuine. Not because Tyler liked Jake, but because Tyler was excited about finally springing his trap. "Great," Tyler said. "His name is Marcus Webb. I think you two will have a lot to talk about." Jake nodded and finished his coffee, knowing that Marcus Webb was probably another federal agent whose job was to record Jake accepting an offer to commit cybercrime. But Jake had one advantage Tyler didn't know about. Jake knew what was coming. And Jake had a plan of his own. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.